Steve has made what I guess is a really accurate prediction. No matter what the form of a regulation, maybe Todd's or somebody else's, Steve wrote, "We must conclude the necessity or inevitability of fulsome regulation. A market as big as that for digital assets, and which is to a significant extent retail, including the losses are very significant in retail, will," Steve wrote, "will be regulated." Now, my comment, thinking that is correct, is not an endorsement of the policy, but it's certainly an endorsement of it as a prediction. As we know, the Wall Street Journal wrote in its yesterday's page one headline, "Regulators raise the heat on crypto's biggest players, and the walls," that is regulatory walls, "are closing around crypto." Now, there are lots of regulatory specifics being debated. We've heard a lot of it. You regulate cryptocurrency as a security, a commodity, a deposit, a gambling event, a currency, a payments product, or something else. Which regulators should do it? And of course, in a federal republic, how much is federal and how much should be states? As we observe all this conversation, it's ironic that cryptocurrency began as an attempt to escape government money and the government's central bank's inflationary policies. But now we find the crypto firms and their lobbyists energetically trying to shape their growing entanglement with the government, especially for stable coins. If you think of them as part of crypto, as an important part of cryptocurrency, they are completely tied, have completely tied themselves to the government currency, and are therefore completely tied to the inflation created by expansion of the government, by printing of the government currency, and their purchasing power depreciation will automatically match that. But I want to suggest that underneath all these specific questions are a range of fundamental views, or we might say schools, about the evolution of cryptocurrency regulation. I'm going to borrow here from a really good paper by Doug Elliott, a new one called the 2023 Key Political Issues in Finance. And he's very nicely, in my opinion, laid out 4 of these, which he calls dismissives, opponents, pragmatists, and supporters. I'm just going to restate his summary of each of these and then suggest a 5th general approach to which I subscribe, called agnostics. Now, starting with Doug's range of these various cryptos, or the macro approach, he discusses dismissives in the following terms: perhaps 10% of policymakers believe cryptocurrencies will fade on their own as the speculative bubble continues to deflate. They oppose comprehensive regulation since they believe it would give cryptocurrencies an appearance of safety and government sponsorship. On the extreme side, the side of this dismissive school, we have statements like this: instead of regulation, it's far better to do nothing and just let crypto burn, as Stephen Cicchetti and Kim Schoenholtz wrote, adding, actively intervening would convey undeserved legitimacy on a system that, as Todd also just argued, does little to support real economic activity. Now, the extreme opposite of that let it burn view would be the president's working group proposal mentioned by Jerry to treat stable coins as deposits and add government insurance and taxpayer support. Well, you have to say that nothing could be further from the original philosophy of cryptocurrency, or nothing could be a more complete ideological surrender than accepting a government guarantee. This brings me to the second group, Elliott's opponents. The opponents, he writes, are a fairly large group that does not see social value in these crypto assets, but doesn't think they'll go away. Therefore, they're in favor of heavy restrictive regulation, ideally in a way that keeps them out of the traditional financial system. Well, we've just heard Todd make a very interesting presentation of this opponent's point of view. This view is also consistent with the current, what's been called crypto clampdown by the financial regulators. Now, this brings us to the pragmatists, another large group, wrote Elliott, that doesn't like these crypto assets either, but believes they are here to stay and will increasingly intertwine with the financial system. So what do? Their focus is on ensuring appropriate laws, regulations, and approaches to protect the financial system and its users. And the fourth group that Elliott mentions are the supporters. And he thinks they're perhaps 10% of the policymakers. They see a parallel with dot-coms in the 1990s. That is to say, a massive amount of speculation and leverage speculation and fraud, and very large losses for investors. But out of all that, something that turned into a massively important and beneficial economic innovation and transformation. Another example of such a situation might be the building of railroads in the 19th century, which resulted in huge defaults and investor losses, but fundamental economic advance in the long term. So in this view, the so-called crypto winter would be a useful washing out of the excesses preparatory to a new trend. And therefore, the supporters group opposes heavy-handed regulation. So to quote Elliott's conclusion, it will be interesting to see what balance is achieved between these different camps. And indeed, it will. And whatever actually happens will be heavily influenced by these macro points of views and underlying beliefs, or we could say predictions, excuse me, of what's going to happen with crypto, which in fact nobody can know. And this will lead us in a minute to the agnostic school. Now, I do want to just say a word about disclosure, which Jerry very nicely and clearly discussed. The relevant ones seem to me, the key relevant ones seem to me financial statements, as Jerry pointed out, which have to be audited and published in banks and other financial companies, and are essential to understanding the risks, and clear descriptions of the risks and the terms and conditions of the contract being entered into by the buyer. All right, now let me come to agnostics, the school to which I belong. They're built. They include 2 points made by the great philosopher economist Friedrich Hayek. One, it would be good to have competitive alternatives to government money, what he called denationalization of money. And I agree with this, but personally, I doubt that any current cryptocurrencies can succeed at creating that competitive alternative to government currency. But I don't know this. And how do we find out? Well, as Hayek would say, we need a market. We need a market as a competitive discovery mechanism, but certainly a market with good disclosure, minimal fraud, and clear disclosure of terms and conditions. As the book of Proverbs says, a just balance and scales belong to the Lord. And in today's world, the just balance and scales are still important, but the financial just balances and scales are financial statements, full audited financial statements with clear disclosure. And then the market will decide whether cryptocurrency phenomenon is going to crash and burn, lots of failures, well, markets include failures, or whether it is going to come into a new phase and be a new success and survive with creating a new trend. All that is to be discovered in the market, and the views which believe they can predict what will happen, it seems to me, need to take more agnosticism into account, that we don't know what will happen, but we do know whatever is going to happen out of this market needs to have just balances and scales. Thanks a lot, JC.
Alex, your timing is perfect.